Everyone, welcome back. It's Monday. Welcome back to HockeyBuzzcast. Sorry, I'm wearing my child's baseball hat today. Just been that kind of day around here. But
I thought you were Bruce Wayne.
yes, I am. Well, I've always been a superhero.
Yeah. So, what did you want to talk about, LeBron?
Okay, so there's an interesting thing that ESPN sort of slid in today on their First Take show. Max Kellerman, who, I'm guessing he's a guy in his 40s. Yeah. I don't think he saw much of Dr. J in the ABA, if at all. And so he basically said, well, LeBron James is better. Then he started naming players, and he named Dr. J as one of them. And so when you look up the numbers, and this is the part where I say statistics matter, because you can't simply shrug off the ABA, because so many guys, when they crossed over to the NBA, when that league shut down, became Hall of Famers. That league was a run-and-gun league, the way this league is. Very, very little defense compared to the NBA, a lot more exciting. It was my favorite league, actually, because the NBA was sort of slow and plodding, and guys were elbowing under the boards and all that, right? So Dr. J, in his career, has won 3 titles, 2 of them over there, same as LeBron James. He's won 4 MVPs, same as LeBron James. He has 30,000 points, more than LeBron James, and he's actually got 3 scoring titles, 2 more than LeBron James. And, of course, they say, well, LeBron James is better than Dr. J and I'm thinking, well, how?
Yeah, and Dr. J did it in an era where you had Bird and Magic, where you had George Gervin. You had I mean maybe this is not an argument against the dominance of LeBron, but there's nobody that really rivals him. So for somebody to win 3 scoring titles and win 3 MVPs when all those other players
– and again, some were in the ABA, but again, Gervin was there and Malone was there. There was a great players there.
Yeah, so I'm old enough to remember Dr. J. Now, granted, I didn't see the Nets games, New Jersey Nets games.
And he won one with the Virginia Squires too.
Right, I only saw him with the 76ers, that was in the middle latter half. He was still a phenomenal player and rivaled Bird and rivaled Magic. So yeah, no,
and he was the final one. This one will get you, and this one will get Eck too, because even though he doesn't care about basketball, he'll care about the math part of this. So then he said, well, I pretty much could tell you that LeBron James is more important to his team than any player that's ever existed. And I thought about that, and Bill Russell, I think, won 11 titles in 12 years, but he had great teammates, so I'm not even going to put Bill Russell in it. When Will Chamberlain scored 100 points for the Sixers, he was the team. If they didn't have him, they weren't winning championships. And again, what were the Nets like when they lost Dr. J? They were nothing. Absolutely nothing.
I grew up okay. I grew up a basketball fan, a little bit when I was a kid, and I followed I followed this era. You're in my era now that I can talk a little bit about. But yeah, right. I was. I followed and I'm 48, so I followed the NBA version of Dr. J more than the ABA version of Dr. J. But he was. He was transformative to basketball, especially in this area, and completely. There was no one. I played. A lot of people played. It was just one of those things. I'm sure LeBron does the same thing, but it's one of those things like more people played basketball when Dr. J was around than whenever ever before. He was one of those. He was a Jordan-esque type player for sure. Yeah. And I always thought he was more like Jordan than LeBron.
Yeah.
In terms of the style, LeBron physically is more like Magic Johnson. He's 6 feet. Yeah. He can. He could play guard. And he could play center like Magic did. So, I think physically he's more like Magic, whereas Dr. J is more like Jordan in the sense that I think Dr. J may have been taller than Jordan. Jordan was what, 6'4", 6'5", Russ? Something like that?
Yeah, I want to say he was 6'5".
Yeah, and I don't know what Dr. J is, but I would be surprised if he's much taller than that.
6'3".
Yeah, right. So let me just talk about this because
the last thing, and then you can talk about it. The last thing I was going to say is just imagine me saying, Mike, I'm smarter than you and Eck, even though you guys have a 3.75 grade point average and mine's a 3.5. I'm smarter than you. That's basically where the argument was to me. That's all.
Hey, if I had $1 for every time somebody makes a baseless argument. No, okay, and if I did, I would have spent more on the Kentucky Derby. And I'm not a gambler. I know nothing about horse racing, but I think like every other amateur person, when the Kentucky Derby comes along, they'll just put a few bucks on a horse and hope that they win. I'm not somebody who follows the track conditions or anything like that. So like I see the list last week of the names of the horses who are running in the Kentucky Derby. I think it was like 20 horses in the race. And there was a horse called Battle of Midway. Mm-hmm. And Battle of Midway was the Battle of Midway, which happened in 1942, is something I was doing my master's thesis on. I never completed it, but I worked on it for a while. Always fascinated about the battle. Always, there was a movie in the 70s with Charlton Heston. It was always fascinating to me. So I'm like, okay, that makes sense. I'm going to bet that horse. I go into the OTB, which I've never gone into before.
You've never been to an OTB?
I've never been into OTB. Really? Had to be instructed about how to bet. Put $20 to win on Battle of Midway and went about my business. So Saturday, I'm covering the Toronto Marlies Syracuse Crunch playoff game in Syracuse, and all of a sudden I see Battle of Midway popping up on Twitter, and I'm like, oh my God, I won! It finished in third. I bet it to win. It finished. It paid $20 to show. If I hadn't have been if I had to bet it across the board or just bet it to show, I would have won $200. But instead, I won nothing. Okay.
Yeah. You gave it a go, Mike.
Yeah. What you can do. I didn't get a chance to.
I didn't even watch it.
I didn't either.
Anyway, all right. Let's get going here. I watched it. I'm a huge horse racing fan, but that's a story for another day. I grew up around the track, so I love the track. My horse didn't come in at all. I mean, the Kentucky Derby is one of the hardest.
That's a metaphor for something else, but I'm going to leave it alone.
The Kentucky Derby is one of the hardest races in the world to predict.
Yes.
You've got you got how many, 20 horses or whatever it is. It's craziness.
Yes.
And it was raining, so on top of it, that's also going to play into it.
Well, that's what makes the long shots even more of a better bet.
It does. I mean, I got to send this real quick story. This is really funny. So, all right, this is real fast. So years ago, I went with Captain EO, who you guys know, another hockey person, to Garden State Racetrack. We would go quite a bit because we grew up in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, where Garden State Racetrack was. And we went and saw a horse race, and we just went on a rogue Thursday night. And like the 6th race was a claimer. It was just nothing big. It was just like every other race, like a 1 miler race. We watched a horse win by more than I'd ever seen a horse win by in its life. Like literally, this horse won by the other horses were still rounding the final turn. Must have been like 15 laps, and that horse was called Spend a Buck. All right.
Oh.
This is before This was like Spend a Buck, one of Spend a Buck's first races, and this was a good month and a half before the Kentucky Derby, and then the Jersey. It was really crazy. There was nobody there. Literally, I was standing at the finish line, which is where we would always stand at the finish line, right down by the rail to watch the horse come in. Nobody else was there, and we could not believe how much this horse won by. So we went. So then of course Spend a Buck goes on and wins the Kentucky Derby. Just was like out of nowhere, really, like a Jersey horse. He wasn't a favorite in that Derby at all. Wins the Derby, comes back and doesn't run in the Preakness because the Jersey Derby draws him back to Cherry Hill for $1 million to race in the Jersey Derby. It was really, and I was there for that too. It's kind of fun. Anyway, but that was my little Spend a Buck story. I was always that's what I always follow. Any children or offspring of that horse, I always bet on. So it's fun. It was a fun thing to see. All right, ready? Here we go. Hello, Hockey World. It's Monday, May 8th, 2017.
I'm Michael Lagello.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Eklund. You're watching the HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday at this time to fill you in on the comings and goings in the hockey world. And we have a lot of comings and goings to talk about today. We have a team that's going in St. Louis, and a team that really is continuing to surprise in the fact that they are now 8-2 in the playoffs. In the Nashville Predators, who I think are just finding ways that they feel like they're starting to get that team of destiny feel to them. They're finding ways to win, no matter what they do. So I want to talk about them before we get into the other fun stuff, but because they're pretty easy to talk about. I mean, they really are just what they are at this point. Pekka Rinne is playing out of his mind. He's playing really well. He's making big saves at big times, and they're just opportunistic. I mean, they played a horrible first period yesterday against St. Louis.
Yeah.
And somehow managed to win that game. Like that, they really shouldn't have won yesterday's game at all. I thought they were in big trouble in that.
I'll tell you what the biggest problem with the Blues is, and we talked about it once before. When they got rid of Kevin Shattenkirk, Jordan Schmaltz is not ready to be the offensive force that he might be able to be in the future. Jay Bouwmeester and Alex Pietrangelo are not offensive defensemen. They're very good puck movers, great defensemen, great athletes. They don't put up points. They don't score goals. And they need the offensive push from the blue line. They didn't get it. And with Laviolette, that's his specialty, and Nashville is getting it because they do have those guys. And to me, that's a big difference in the series.
Well, I'm not trying to take anything away from Nashville because any team that gets to the conference final deserves credit, but I think they benefited from the fact that they were playing against the worst team in the worst of the 8 teams remaining. I think St. Louis was. St. Louis should be celebrating that they got past the first round because I didn't think that they were going to get by Minnesota, and it was because of Jake Allen that they did. But they won 2 games in the series, but I really didn't see a lot out of the Blues that really made me think that they were going to win this series. I was surprised when they won to make it 3-2, and they got off to a quick start with Paul Stastny's goal to take the lead. But I think by about the 5-minute mark of the second period, Nashville took over that game, and it was just a matter of if they were going to get a shot past Allen, and once they did, and once they took the lead on the Johansson goal, I thought it was over with. So, credit to Nashville. It's going to be a great atmosphere for the Western Conference Final, but they benefited by the fact that they didn't have to play Minnesota, who I thought was the better of the 2 teams.
I agree.
Let me take issue with that a little bit, Mike. I'd like to agree with you, but then we'd both be wrong. This is one of those cases where, the Blues are better than teams that are still playing. The Blues are better.
I don't think so. I disagree with that.
Well, if they're not, still they're one of the final 8 teams in the NHL.
Right.
They are. Yeah.
So you could talk about the best of the final 8. That's still pretty darn good. Plus, the Predators eliminated what maybe thought were the best team in 4 games. So it's like, to me, and this Blues team was very good this year from the second half of the season on. This was one of the top teams in the league. If you look at the records, I think they were the 4th best team in the NHL. They're like,
but again, it's not fluky. There was a flukiness to them, though.
Yeah. They were very good after March the 1st. They were. Remember when they traded Shattenkirk, they were borderline to make the playoffs. I think they were up by 1 or 2 points.
Right. They took off, and after March 1st, you said they were great, right? And from the coaching change on, they were pretty darn good. And from March 1st on, everyone's like, oh, they might not make the playoffs, so they're trading Shattenkirk. And I think they were going to trade Shattenkirk. I think they should have done it because I think it was a distraction for them, to be honest. But I think that they did a good job with it at the end of the day. So, I just think that, this is the thing. You get a defense like Nashville has, you get a goalie like they have, and that's a recipe for winning a Stanley Cup. It just is. The bottom line is not that, this is no different than other teams we've seen do this before. They have the perfect combination of things going on right now. They have a good combination of young players, combination of old players. They've got it. They've kind of got all the. Mike Fisher is a great person to have on this team. I'm not saying Nashville.
We're not discounting Nashville. We're just saying.
I think that it's like I think it's funny to sit back and say that beating the Chicago Blackhawks and St. Louis Blues in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs is not a good thing.
I didn't mention the Blackhawks. I mentioned specifically the Blues. Yes,
the Blackhawks was a big deal. Beating the Blues is a big deal, but not as big a deal. It's just not.
The Blues were a really good team this year, and they were a really good team last year. And this Blues team is not. They struggled at times this year. Yes, they did. They no question they weren't dominant, but that's team. That's at the end of the day. That team is still this team that's been very good for a couple years now. Like really,
they're not scoring goals.
Can we talk about a really I think just a crazy disappointment is Tarasenko. To be honest,
that's a big deal.
He was last year in the playoffs too. Remember the Sharks series? Tarasenko was terrible in it.
Yeah, and that should tell you something, because if Tarasenko doesn't score, they don't win. Because why? They only have one legitimate scorer. Jaden Schwartz is an excellent player. They have other good players like Steen and Stastny. But in terms of a sniper, that's the only guy they have. And after they traded Shattenkirk,
Fabry's out, right? But Fabry's also a big time player. So
yeah, but no. Well,
he's not big time yet.
He's had one half season.
He's a big time player.
He might be. But
sit there and say that he's. Of course, he hasn't proven himself like some of these other players,
right, but exactly
challenging. Plays a really good player.
I mean, he could very well be, but he's had one rookie season, then a disappointing sophomore season, then he got hurt and he's out for the rest of the year. So I mean, there's something to prove there. But what I'm saying is, going into the playoffs, they didn't have, as Russ pointed out, they didn't have the offensive weapon in Shattenkirk on the blue line. All the weight was on Colton Parayko in terms of being able to generate offense. After that, you really didn't have a lot. Peter Angelo and Bouwmeester are a shutdown pair. If you shut down Tarasenko, there's nobody else to score. So that was the problem.
No, scoring is their issue right now. There's no question about it. And there's no two ways. I mean, you're right, and they rely on Jaden Schwartz to do a lot more than they should have to.
Yeah.
What's his name? 57.
Perron, David
Perron. Really disappointing.
Perron's not a good player anymore.
Yeah, not a good player anymore, and it's a shame because I mean, at one point he was really. I thought I liked him a lot, and he now he makes a lot of stupid plays. Like the penalty he took yesterday was critically damaging in the first period. With the point at which, I mean, the Predators did nothing on the power play, but it stopped the Blues because the Blues were flying. The Blues were going to score another goal or another 2 goals in that first period. And Ron then takes a terrible penalty. That's just, I mean, that to me, if I'm, I would have benched him the rest of the game after that. That was just, that was so, you cannot take a penalty in that situation when your team is dominating the other team and just take a mid-ice interference penalty like crazy. It's just ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. All right, but even though you guys hate the Predators, let's move on.
But here's the thing. Jake Allen is number 2 in save percentage in these playoffs, right? And if I look who the best scorer is in the playoffs for them, it is Jaden Schwartz, who has 9 points in 11 games, and he's ranked somewhere like the 15th best scorer in the playoffs. Right. That is why they lost.
Jake Allen was their best player in the playoffs, no question about it. And it's not his fault they lost, and everybody's going to always. It's
not his fault.
Everybody always blames the goalies in St. Louis. This was not St. Louis's goalies.
No, the case of this series was in the first round against Chicago. In the first round against Minnesota, Jake Allen was superhuman. In the second round, he was Jake Allen. He was good. He wasn't great. And they needed him to be superhuman for them to win. Now, that tells you that there's shortcomings on that team that Jake Allen standing on his head, or Jake Allen being just normal Jake Allen, couldn't cover up. And that means that Doug Armstrong in the offseason better address those issues, because that team, I think, is sort of in that middle of the road right now where they're good, but they're not good enough to win.
And here's the thing. Steen and Schwartz were the only 2 players they had in the top 30 in scoring.
Yeah.
That's it. And
I know. I mean, there's issues there, but that's always been kind of St. Louis's jam. Like they've never really been they've always been a team that's good scoring from everywhere. They have good defense, and they have really 3 really good defenders still. And I'll take
but they don't put up a lot of points. That's the problem.
No, I know, and they're not and then they're point producing defensemen. Was Shattenkirk a little bit.
Like actually, Mike was surprised, and I think I was a little taken aback. Mike, what was the number for Jay Bouwmeester playoff stats?
It was like 49 games and 6 assists. I mean, that's it. Not even a goal. I mean, unless NBC was wrong with that stat. I did a double take when I saw that. I'm like, this is a guy, when he was with Florida, even earlier in his days with
Florida. I'm thinking that, Mike. I remember his first playoff with Florida, and this guy, this guy's going to be unbelievable.
Well, no. Wait a second. Didn't he not make the playoffs with? He didn't play in the playoffs until he got to
Florida. He played in the playoffs against the Flyers with Florida, against Van Beesbrook.
I'm looking it up. Hold on.
I'm almost positive this one.
I mean, if the graphic is, maybe it
is correct. He has 6 playoff points, no goals. It's hard to believe.
Yeah, there you go. I mean,
I think that's true. But I remember, he when he came into the league, though, he was not a goal scorer at all.
But no, he's only had 3 years of double-digit goals. The thing about Jay Bouwmeester was when he was, and I was at that draft. It was my first draft when he was getting compared to Bobby Orr and all this craziness. He played the part because he looked the part, right? He had the size, he had speed, he was faster than a lot of defensemen when he first came in the league because the league hadn't changed over to the speed league it is. But offensively, it never really kicked in for him. And really, after 2009, he has never had more than 6 goals in a year, or he had 1 year where he had 42 points. Otherwise, he is basically now like a 20-point guy, if at best.
Yeah.
Yeah,
he's a great defender. He's a great defender, and he lost ice time.
He did not play in the playoffs until he got to St. Louis. He never played.
That's true. Yeah, you're right.
Florida and never with Calgary. So and I think you're thinking of Jovanovski.
Maybe. But 49 games with not even a goal.
I'm losing my mind.
It's all right. So I do it all the time.
It's crazy. I mean, think about that. 49 playoff games, not even a goal.
Yeah, that is crazy. All right, let's move on to all right, Anaheim, Edmonton. I mean, there's nothing to talk about this weekend with those two teams. So we'll move on to the next series.
Oh, yeah.
I do want to point this out.
It's a 6-hour show in Anaheim, Edmonton right now. But
But I do want to point this out. Doug Lidster, who was not an offensive defenseman, has 6 playoff goals. That's hard to believe, too.
Yeah. He's a great player, Doug Lidster. I love Doug Lidster.
Yeah, he was a really good player.
Nucks didn't play at all in the playoffs back then, though. They weren't always in that either.
Let me just say
All right,
this.
let's talk about Edmonton. First of all, let's begin here with the controversial play, okay? We got to start there because that's going to be – is that okay? Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Kessler deciding to pull apart the legs of Gibson. So that to me was absurd. Just absolutely. I mean, and I wrote in my blog, and I really appreciate the fact that people on my website were cool about it, because I've written, I think, 2 articles in the entire time that I've been doing this that called out the refs on anything. Like, that's 12 years, article every single day, 2 articles. This is the second time I called on the refs. But this was just, and yes, all the things are true. That Edmonton had to be bad enough, had to make mistakes to put themselves in that position. They were up 3-0. It shouldn't have been 3-2. It was 3-3. All that stuff is true. But at the end of the day, you cannot, just because you are knocked into the goalie, does not mean you're allowed to do anything at that point to the goalie that you want to do. Like, to me, that's where this thing gets hazy. The rule right now,
I don't even know what goalie interference is anymore.
If a defender is actually touching you, or I'll even say even playing you in towards the crease, if a good defender is even near you, that enables you to do whatever the hell you want. And that's where I was at. So
I'm unable to debate this because I have no idea what the rule is anymore.
Well, that and the fact that I think and I
whatever it is, Russ, it's not that you're allowed to pull the goalie's legs apart. I'm sorry, Mike. But whatever it is, the rule, you're definitely not allowed to do that. Let's just can we all agree on that? I mean,
apparently that's not true.
No.
Sorry, Mike.
See, before the playoffs started, I said we were going to have a soul-crushing controversy based on video review. It was bound to happen.
Really?
And this is where it's gone so far. Okay, now obviously Edmonton bounced back and was incredible yesterday, but they can look at it that they lost this, they had a chance to win this series if they had just held on to that 3-0 lead. In 2 games this weekend, you had the Jimmy VC goal with the Rangers in Ottawa, which we'll talk about, where, okay, that was good. That was good that you had video replay, because they didn't count it a goal, and it was obviously a goal. The glove was over the goal line. So There's the positive. But the negative is this subjective stuff that happens with, is the goalie being interfered with? Is the goalie not being interfered with? Is he being pushed in by the defenseman, or is the player allowing himself to get pushed in by the defenseman and lingering there too long? All it is that it opens this league up for more controversy. I'm fairly sure we're going to have something akin to the Brett Hull no goal in the Stanley Cup final, because it's bound to happen. Yeah. It's going to happen.
It is. You're so right. And it's I was glad to see even Bob McKenzie calling out the fact that he thinks the offsides review is ruining the league. I thought that was something. I mean, when Bob says that, that's a big deal. And I agree with him on that too. I mean, the offside thing, we're totally missing the point. They're 2 different things, though, right?
But they're not going to change it. Remember, they said only 8 games have been affected because of it this year. They're not changing it. That's what they said.
All right, the goalie interference, the offsides.
No, not the goalie interference, the offsides.
Right. Okay, let's get away from that for a second. It's ridiculous, but that's not really the big problem. Like, the big problem is this goalie interference thing, okay, which is that it really does appear as if the rule, now if we were to write it out by, if you were to write the rule after watching it, you would say this: you're not allowed to touch the goalie unless a player on the goalie's team is close to you in any way, shape, or form and appears to have pushed you towards the goalie, or appears to have even played you or made a defensive play on you. So the closer you skate to the goalie, the more likely that a person is at least going to put a stick on you, which means they're going to have to try. You can't just let a guy skate freely through the crease. So putting a stick on versus pushing into, that's where I think we need to define that, because I think the pushing into concept is, it's very easy to look like if someone puts a stick on you to fall that way and look like you're being pushed into the goalie. Then once you're pushed into the goalie, apparently, like I said, the way the rule's written now, you can do whatever the hell you want. And that's also got to change because you have to be like, okay, I've been pushing the goalie, but you can't physically put your hands on the goalie or reach to the goalie or whatever, because I just couldn't believe this. I couldn't believe it. And I thought, I thought the Oilers went, and the way they react to it was actually pretty amazing. Like that overtime, it was a good overtime. And that was just crazy. It's got to stop. But they did come back. They do bounce back, like we say. They come back with a really big game. But this game says something more about the Ducks, I think, than it does the Oilers.
Yeah, I agree.
Game 6.
It became a throwaway game for them. Like they just.
But this is the thing, Russ. And I was doing a blog on this, and I'm just going to give away my punchline here because, but it's the truth. When you look back at the Ducks, okay, and they've lost all these game 7s, they've also been leading all those series by 4-3. They've been leading. They've lost game 6s before them all. Like this is not the first time they have thrown away a game 6 and gotten killed in it. This is not the first time the Ducks have just had a horrible game 6 with a chance to eliminate a team. That's
Russ.
And we said last year, I think on this very show, the problem with the Ducks is not the game 7s; it's the game 6s.
Right.
I always look for historical comparatives when it comes to playoff series, even if it crosses different sports. And, the one traumatic one for me was 2001 with the Yankees and the Diamondbacks. If you remember, Yankees win that traumatic, that game 5 in New York. I think I can't remember if it was Tino's home run or whatever, Brocious' home run. They go to game 6 in Arizona with Andy Pettitte on the mound, and they lose, I think, 13-1.
Right.
They just completely mail it in. And that was the thing. I mean, I turned that game on 10 minutes into the first period. It was already 2-0. Draisaitl had already scored a couple goals. And I'm thinking, this is the exact same thing that happened, although it took a little longer. I mean, Edmonton is up 3-0 with 4.5 minutes left to go in the third period before Anaheim wakes up and says, "Oh, we got to start playing now."
And that's the problem with Anaheim. You're right.
Yeah.
Starting games, I don't know who's worse, the New York Rangers or the Anaheim Ducks in starting games and not looking good. Now, I will say this. Gibson didn't have a good game, but that first goal by Draisaitl, you expect that goal to come in like 90 miles an hour, and that thing came in like 2 miles an hour because he flubbed the shot. And you could speak to that as a goalie. When you're expecting a hard shot and the motion's there and it just trickles like that, that's hard to cover.
It's really hard to cover, and it's easy to look terrible. It's easy to look really bad. Like that I felt bad for him. I mean, it was just a really hard. I mean, there's a reason that Major League Baseball players can't hit 75-mile-an-hour changeups. It's like really tricky. I mean, it is. Really is. And I didn't.
Now, was the Anaheim defense completely non-existent for the whole first period? Absolutely.
Yeah, and this is the other thing going. I mean, Anaheim. I think the events conspired against them because before the game you hear Andres Sekera out for the game, Oscar Klefbom off for the game. I almost think that mentally they were saying, "Oh, we got this." They're going to be shorthanded. They're playing Griffin Reinhart and Eric Greiba on defense, and they expected just Edmonton to just fold up their tent and not even be in. And Edmonton surprised them by actually having some intestinal fortitude and standing up and jumping all over them. That's something that, a team with a lot of experience like Anaheim, I mean, they have a lot of young players too, but the Getzlofs, the Perrys, guys like Antoine Vermette who won a Stanley Cup. These are the guys who have to step to the forefront, and I didn't even notice them. The only guy who did anything in Game 6 was Ryan Kessler getting in McDavid's face.
Right.
At least you can make them pay a price for the win. At least you maybe get a little scummy and hack and slash. Say, okay, get prepared for Game 7. But there was a complete El Foldo by Anaheim in Game 6, and that's something that Randy Carlyle is going to have to straighten out before, I think, Wednesday when the game is scheduled.
And here's the thing: Edmonton didn't even have Klefbom; they played Griffin Reinhart.
Right. Yeah. I know, it's crazy. I mean, and I think that. It's funny because the momentum in hockey in the playoffs, I'm such a big believer in it, and I'm a big believer in the fact that when teams get killed, it doesn't help them. I mean, it does.
I don't think in this series there is zero momentum because.
Well, no, I actually will say that I agree. There's no typical momentum, but and I shouldn't even say momentum. To me, it's more like an ebb and flow thing. Like the ebb and flow of the series is that the way the Ducks won Game 5 doesn't do the Ducks any real favors, because
no,
3-0, you come back, you win 3, you score the 3 goals late, making me feel like you're kind of invincible, like you can just take off the first period of the game because you can come from behind on this team.
I think, see, in a way I agree with you, but I think the one thing in Anaheim's advantage is in this series, they're at a Game 7 where they've played basically 2 3/4 periods, or 2 games and 3/4 of a game in Anaheim where they've been the worst team. And you can say, okay, well, the odds are that a team of the quality of Anaheim will step up in another game, in that 7th game, because they can't play that bad 4 games in a row at home. Well, maybe they can. And that's the thing. It's like, I mean, if Anaheim does not come out whipped up into a lather in Game 7 and ready to bowl over a young and inexperienced Edmonton team, then that's a complete nightmare and their own fault.
True. It's hard to argue that. I mean, to me, I think, yeah, and to me that is the case, right? Because I was just getting a text there, so excuse me if I missed it. But I'm going to talk about that too. We're going to talk about Montreal in a second. So the text was involving. But yeah, if we're looking at this too, like I said before, it's a tough way for Anaheim to win. It's also a tough way for Edmonton to win Game 6, because you don't want to blow a team out like that. Like, you want to win a game 4-3, 4-2, because honestly, what happens after that game is the slate gets wiped. Like, for Anaheim,
they flush it.
Yeah, they flush it. It's a serious wake-up call. For Edmonton, their confidence goes, and you have to work. They have to work as hard as they did in Game 6, and whether or not you're going to work that hard or not, you're going to have to work harder in Game 7, because this is also, we're looking at a team here with a ton of. This is like the ultimate challenge as to whether the whole thing, do you have to get to the playoffs and win first or not, matters, right? Because there is no team with more experience in Game 7s than Anaheim. And there is no team with less experience in Game 7s than Edmonton.
Yeah, but that experience is not exactly going to pay off.
Good, but that's okay. It's because the way experience usually works is, yeah, you go and you lose first so you can win. They've lost a lot first. They've lost first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. But will the Anaheim, these Edmonton Oilers, they didn't know about the playoffs before they got to the playoffs, and they don't know about Game 7, so they've got to Game 7s. I mean, that's the other thing. So this is whether they're going to have to get, whether they're going to get, whether they're going to know what to do. They're either going to be too young and it's not going to matter, and that's great, or they're going to be nervous. I mean,
I'm not sure how much that Edmonton didn't buy into the piling on in Game 6, because they came out in the second period and scored a couple goals really quickly, and it was 7-1 or 6-1. And I didn't watching that game perceive that they were taking the pedal off of the metal. They were not throttling back. They were not going into a lower gear. They were piling it on. I think they wanted to make sure that there was no way that Anaheim was going to come back after scoring the 3 goals in 4.5 minutes. But the thing I was surprised at, it was there wasn't more extracurricular stuff that happened late in the game. I thought messages were going to be sent. I mean, usually in the playoffs, when you're up by 5 or 6 goals, somebody's going to take a run at somebody.
No, but I think Kessler was sending a message in a less overt way, but I think he was getting to guys, and I think he was sort of like,
yeah, it was tough, because I think both teams, if you would have just pulled them, would have just said, let's just end this after the first period and get on 7, because no one wants to, at that point, everybody was really nervous.
Yeah, I think Kessler laid the groundwork for that. The funny thing was I was doing a live radio interview for a show I'm on every Sunday, and they asked me about the momentum factor. What does it mean that Edmonton lost in overtime? And I said, clearly nothing, because they're up 5-0. Like, it's just – and clearly the next game it's going to be the same thing. There's not going to be any momentum for either team in the next game.
I do think there's not going to be any momentum, but I think that it's going to be harder for the Edmonton Oilers to get up for that game than it's going to be for the Anaheim Ducks.
I agree. I mean, look, I think when someone like Scotty Bowman says there's no more home ice, I disagree, because I think there are a few places that can give an advantage, and I do think the pond at Anaheim is one of them. And because it's not – I mean, you've been there. I haven't been there, but I know where it sort of is, and it's not an easy place to get to. It's not – like, everything sort of leans towards the Ducks when you're playing.
Yeah, it's not a real – I don't know. It's not a super loud building. It's not. I mean,
I'm not going with loud. I'm just going with convenience of flying into the airport, getting there.
Yeah, I mean, they're gonna fly and they're gonna stay. There's hotels right there. They're gonna stay right next to it. It's like really. I mean, it's it's definitely it's Disney World, right? So I mean, it's Disneyland. So it's basically like you drive down a highway and there's a road and a big sign above says left to the pond, right to Disneyland. Literally, that's what happened. You're right there. So as you go, it's like now I want to bring back. I got this sent to me and I thought it was really interesting. The Predators.
Okay, can I just make one last point?
Yeah, this is gonna.
I think that the extra day is the worst thing that could have happened to Edmonton because being the younger team, an extra day with the anticipation of the Game 7, I think it helps Anaheim because they can it helps them wash away that destructive game. But Edmonton now with those younger players, the pressure will be building up on them. The expectation will be building up on them.
Yeah, and I would say that's usually the case. I would agree with you. But in this particular case, with all of the blown Game 7s at home for Anaheim, I don't know that it is. I think that it changes a little. Like so to finish this Anaheim thing, last year the Predators and Anaheim played in the first round. And it's interesting to follow that series because the first 2 games were won in Anaheim by Nashville. 3-2, and then the Ducks took over the series. They won 3-0 and 4-1 in Nashville. They won 5-2 back in Anaheim, so they were up 3-2.
Yep.
And then it was Game 6 back in Nashville where they lost 3-1, and that was the game where they lost in like double overtime 2-1 in Game 7 to the Predators, on a Mike Fisher goal, I think it was. So
and the change after Game 2 was. Boudreau went from Gibson to Freddie Anderson.
Right, he did. Right.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, in this game, if you start Bernier, you're making a mistake, and I don't think Carlisle will.
No, they won't.
No. The way Bernier played in relief last night, Russ, I think they're going to sink or swim with Gibson. It's going to be.
They're going to have to.
All right, so we got to talk about. We also, of course, have to get into Ottawa and the Rangers. So let's do that because that.
Yeah, can I just react to this one because I was watching this one, honestly, and I'm not trying to react over emotionally here. Alain Vigneault has coached this series like he wants to get fired, because I really think that that the Rangers have mismanaged. This series should be over with. They should have won the Game 2 in Ottawa. They had the lead. They blew it. They had a 1-goal lead in this game. And Brassard ties the game. For some reason, he doesn't trust one of his better defensemen in Brady Shea, who he didn't play. I think it was the last 5 minutes of regulation, but he continues to play Brendan Smith and Nick Holden. Brendan Smith, who's standing in front of the net like the Statue of Liberty, while the puck is right there and does absolutely nothing.
But Brendan Smith hits people and he gets an occasional assist and he has a good shot, Mike. I mean, this is the weirdness of the Rangers. I agree. I mean, I don't understand it. And look, Nick Holden is producing a little bit offensively. He is. Yes. But for the defensive gaffes, it's bad. For, again, not trusting Shea makes no sense. Putting in Brendan Smith in important spots makes no sense. Having Grabner not on the power play makes no sense when your power play stinks. Or even Jesper Fast, because I said Jesper Fast was a really good power play guy until he came to the Rangers. Every other level, he was excellent at it. He can't even sniff it. But yet, they keep Derek Stepan on the power play, and he can't do anything. And he might have a massive injury, and that's fine. But still, take him off the power play then, because he's completely useless on the power play right now. All of these things and the stubbornness is what's hurting the Rangers in this series, because most people would agree the Rangers have a better roster. Most people would also agree Erik Karlsson's been superhuman on one leg.
Yeah.
But there's a way to win this series, and the fact that they're even down in this series is a little crazy, but this is where we are.
Yeah, now the thing that, I mean, and I'm not saying go out and cheap shot him, but honestly, if Erik Karlsson is doing this on one leg, then you have to take away that one leg. You either have to not run him, but you have to be physical with him if possible. You have to lay the body on him. You have to make him pay. And if they do that, I think they still win this series.
You have to catch him to make him pay. Who on that team's catching him?
Well, there are a few guys. A guy like Kreider can catch him. Kreider's got.
Yeah, Kreider might be the one.
I mean, they have to lay the body on this guy. Now, and you made an interesting point about the fact that they put Chris Neal in the lineup, and that sort of neutralized, Tanner Glass's.
It did, and then I'll expand on that. Yeah. Neal, when he was in there, and he wasn't in there a lot. I think first period was only 3 shifts. But he started to creep into the game like the Costanza creeps into your mind. Same thing. And the more that Neil sort of crept into that game, the more Tanner Glass paid attention to him and stopped laying really good checks on Ottawa and stopped any offensive production that he might have had. And he started paying attention to Neil and started jawing with him on the bench and immediately took him out of his game. And so that was a smart move. We kind of knew Neil was going to come in, and it was mission accomplished for Chris Neil.
That game was so. I mean, it was such a. I mean, the way that ended. I mean, you're right. It was just a really horrible way.
And Torres has killed them all series, and they've had no answer for it.
Yeah.
Well, okay, and just
on that last goal to tie the game, that's just like down some of 5 people.
No, but I'm just saying. But he has killed them. Even when he's not scoring, he is getting so many scoring chances.
And just to go back to our video review thing from earlier in the game, just look at that game and how it ended. First you had the video review on the VC goal, which I think was justified because it was they didn't call it a goal, and then they video reviewed it and it was. But Turris scores the goal in overtime. It's clearly not offside, but Elaine Vigneault basically has the video review and says, I may as well request it.
Well, you know what? Here's the debate on it. And I was debating this with some guys who are referees. Possession is another thing now that really could be up for debate when we're talking about these things. Because when you look at the frozen screen, he is clearly over, but the puck isn't. It's not even touching any white. And so there is this little thing, and Ed could talk about it because he played hockey, where now the referees are saying, well, he possessed the puck, so it's okay that he was like that. But did he really have full possession? I think that's why Vigneault did put up that video replay.
Well, he had nothing to lose. He had nothing to lose,
but having full possession is a big deal now when we're getting down to the nitty-gritty of these other things. What do you think?
No, I agree. I agree with you completely, Russ.
Well, I plead with the competition committee and with the NHL during the offseason to change the rule to make it more like breaking the plane in the NFL instead of the foot. Because how many replays have we seen where is the skate fully down? Is he dragging the skate? No, it doesn't matter. If his foot is on the blue line and then that should be, if it's breaking the plane, then fine. That's much easier to make that call.
Or make a skinnier blue line.
Yeah, you could do that.
Sorry, I'm back.
What about that, Eck? What about if we cut the blue line's dimensions in half?
I don't know. It doesn't matter. You're still got the same things.
Not at all, because then on replay, it's gonna be almost impossible to pull off what Mike was just talking about if it's half the size.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I think you might. I mean, I guess I'd have to see what it looks like in the arena and on TV.
Right.
I just think breaking the plane, breaking the plane.
I'm with you on that. I think that's what it needs to be.
And I think they'll do that. They didn't want to do that during the season because to change the rules in the middle of the year, or to say you're going to change the rule and then have the old rule be effective. Be in effect, that would look optically, it would look bad, but they have to change that because all you're doing is like a goal in 15. You're wasting 10 minutes seeing, well, is his foot down? Is his foot not down? Well, change the rule, please.
And here's the funny thing too. I don't think Guy Boucher changed anything in his game plan other than using Chris Neil. Like I didn't see any change in anything. I didn't see them being less in the 1-3-1. I didn't see them being more aggressive on offense. I still think they're the team that doesn't want to make a mistake, but it worked. It's working out for them.
It's working. It is. It's really. It's fascinating. They're
not every game, but it's working for the series.
Yeah, I mean they're another team that has that destiny field to them. It's just kind of crazy. They really are, and they are. I mean,
and then we
have to really. Jeez, so much to talk about. I think I want to talk about Montreal, and I guess we'll get into that tomorrow because we have to talk about Washington, Pittsburgh real quick as well because that's happening tonight.
Well, I mean, we can talk about that pretty quickly because honestly, the game this weekend where Washington staved off elimination. I mean, first of all, I'm shocked that Crosby and Sheary played. I really am. I cannot believe, I cannot believe that up 3-1 that they would, if Crosby feels fine, he feels fine. I understand that, but you can choose to be careful. And you could go in without Crosby in that 5th game, and if you win, great, and if you don't, win, fine. But I'm really surprised.
The doctors gave him a choice. If you do this, you're risking this, and if you don't, you're not. And he probably chose to play.
Yeah, I can't believe that he would. I mean, knowing his history, he's been so conservative in the past. I can't believe he would risk it. Unless
we don't know how much of a risk. We don't know, but I'm just saying.
Been okay. He must have just really been okay. I mean, people just don't know with concussions. I mean, people say concussion history, but what you also don't say about Crosby is he's handled his concussions really well. So concussion history is one thing, but the fact that every time he's had a concussion, he has taken his time. He's not come back too quickly.
The positive thing about this one is by playing in that game, he'll have his timing back for the next game. He won't lose anything now.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I mean, I don't know how quickly the timing would go.
The timing goes away on some of these players. It's a hair thing, and I think it does.
And the people will ask, well, who's the bigger pressure on tonight? Is it on, Pittsburgh wanting to close it out and not going back to Washington for Game 7, or is it on Washington? I mean, I think it's equal. I really don't think that there's any.
No, I think it's on Washington still.
I don't think so. I mean, okay, Ross.
Crosby has a Stanley Cup. It's on Washington. That's my feeling. I mean, it's like the Crosby has a Stanley Cup, and that team, most of those players have Stanley Cup. So I think at the end of the day,
I get that. I'm just saying, it's the overall. If Washington doesn't at least make the Stanley Cup final, then the big C word is going to be mentioned with ever increasing frequency. Again,
Washington took the lead. They're going to have to take the lead in this one. They're going to have to hold the lead and build on the lead. Ovechkin was better with Wilson. I think it's high time in hockey to give Tom Wilson a little more credit for the kind of player he is. I think we've been fair to him on this show, but I think other people have sort of unfairly characterized him as just a goon, and he's not that. He's better than that.
I couldn't agree more with that. I think that was a hugely important move, and just the fact that Backstrom and Ovechkin scored in that game was huge for them. The fact that like I said before, I still think this is a 7-game series. I think it's going back to Washington.
It could be.
I mean, to Pittsburgh. To Washington. Right, to Washington. Sorry, to Washington. It's going back. All right, quickly. We got to go pretty soon, but I started an unprotected thing today. I'm going to be doing more blogs on the draft coming up.
You mean for the NHL expansion draft?
NHL expansion draft. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Sorry, I'm doing too many things at once today. So I wrote a rumor, and I've been getting texts, and one of the reasons I've been sort of distracted is because I heard this rumor that the Canadiens might be offering up Emelin to Vegas. In a trade, and the Knights then would agree to take Davidson, leaving Byron and Hudon,
leaving them alone.
Those are the players that they want. Because
I would want Charles Hudon like tomorrow.
Yeah, and I think there's a big feeling that he would be the guy that and Byron's had a great year and everything but Charles Hudon is really,
he's got a shot you can't teach.
Yeah, so this is the kind of trade I think we could see more of. This is okay. So Emelin, is obviously a good player. He's got only 1-2 more years. And people who seem to assume that George McPhee is going to just take all young players, is not. He's going to get some veteran defensemen if he can.
Sure.
Well, I mean, okay, veteran defensemen are a commodity, and I mean, if they do agree to take Emelin in a trade, it is more than likely to take that player and flip them someplace else.
Yeah, sure. And
because this team, for all the people,
but not right away. He'll play the season, and he'll
flip Emelin right away. Like you're going to have guys like this.
Yeah, Mike, he's got to fill the AHL and the NHL. Well, that's a big task.
Well, you're right, Russ, and that's why I keep saying what's going to happen is he's going to make a lot of these side deals where he's going to get a player to take a player from, say, I'll use Toronto as the example. Yeah. Get a player like Josh Levo, who's an NHL player, who can't play for the Leafs, or Mike Babcock likes other players better. He'll get a player like that for him to take a guy like Eric Fair, who he knows. He'll get two for the price of one.
How do you put that on the sheet? They're just going to be like, they send him to the Vegas.
Future considerations. There'll be a trade announced.
Future considerations.
Yeah.
There won't be any, and there won't be any. It won't be saying that you'll never know that it was so we don't take so and so, or so we do take so. But that'll be the agreement, right? So.
Right.
Or even the Levo portion of it, just using this as an example, or even the Levo portion of it happening after the expansion draft, and maybe Toronto gets somebody that they claimed from somebody else. I mean, that's a possibility. So, yeah. I mean, that's how you work it out. I mean, but that's what's going to happen. He's got to fill not only a 23-man roster in the NHL, he's got to fill up an AHL team, and it doesn't make sense to fill it up with guys who are sort of middle-of-the-road prospects. He's going to try to get young players who can step up in the NHL in a year or two.
Well, this is for sure. And I've got to boogie, guys. And fortunately, we got to end the show here. I got lots of stuff going on. Please make sure you keep an eye on Hockey Buzz because I'm going to be updating this blog here this afternoon because there seems to be more happening.
Flyers are looking at Dean Lombardi, too. I had to squeeze that in. We'll see about that.
Yep. All right. Well, we'll talk soon. Remember, without the buzz, folks, it's just hockey. Talk to you then.